At this time, I would like to introduce Daniel Vassar. He is the supply chain manager for the Atlanta division of the Kroger Company. Mr. Vassar has supply chain and logistics responsibility for the multiple manufacturing and distribution center operations that service the division's 211 stores, working with merchandising, procurement, manufacturers, retail operations, third-party operators, and transportation providers to help facilitate service and delivery of the store's products. Daniel?
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thanks for having me here to speak and talk a little bit about Kroger. I don't have a lot of company information here. I'm mostly focused on the Atlanta operation. Hopefully everybody shops at Kroger and not Whole Foods or Publix, but we can talk later. If we're open to feedback, so we're customer first, so just let me know what we can do to get your business. I've been with Kroger for 7 years, and I originally joined Kroger in the IS department in Cincinnati. I then became a part of the end-to-end team, which was a process improvement initiative looking at from our manufacturing plants or all the way, worked on a produce project out in the fields, all the way to the customer's table and how we can improve and be more cost effective and efficient. So after that, I decided that, yeah, I'll do the operations thing and get into operations 2 years ago. My first week on the job was January 2011 and the ice and snowstorm, and we couldn't ship products for 3 days. And I had 200 store managers calling me, asking me where their trucks was, so it was a good idea to get into operations. So a little bit more about my role. I'm the logistics point of contact for the 211 stores like we talked about. Work actively with 7 distribution centers who service those stores. And some of those are cross docks that we get, and others are direct store deliveries from those other distribution centers. We also have 4 Kroger manufacturing plants that deliver direct to stores, 3 dairies and 1 bakery, and I have transportation responsibilities for those to ensure we're efficient and on-time deliveries from those plants to our stores. Also, my primary focus is on the local third-party operation where we ship dry grocery, perishable, and frozen products from. There's about 650 warehouse folks there, 200 fleet drivers, and that provides the stores with about 10,000 items. An average Kroger store will have about 30,000 items, so the other DCs and places are shipping in more of the items, but we do more of the volume. It's kind of the 80-20 rule with the local DCs that we have responsibility for. Our service area out of Atlanta are Huntsville, Knoxville, Savannah, Myrtle Beach, Columbia, Macon, and the greater Atlanta area. There's well over 100 stores in the greater Atlanta area that we work with. Back in 2011, in April of 2011, a tornado came through the Huntsville area and knocked those 8 stores out of power. And I was once again thinking, why did I want to do operations? But it's always exciting when we're servicing a 24/7 operations and something that's so critical to everyone buying and purchasing food. So we're happy to do it. So a little bit about our objectives, the Kroger Logistics objectives for 2013. Safety is a core value and something we always strive to get better on. The corporate goal is to have an FTE rate of 3.0 or better, or always continuous improvement from where we were previous years. Associate engagement is really big for us. Being customer first, we want to make sure that all our associates are engaged and understand that initiative and understand what their role is in it. We have Associate Insights, which is a survey that's done of the employees, and then we all score ourselves on their engagement and work to improve that year over year. Leadership development and training. We're rolling out some new initiatives within distribution to help associates and leaders in the distribution centers become engaged into the customer first strategy. So we're putting more folks through training and leadership development type initiatives. On-time delivery performance. We have a corporate goal of being 75% on time within a 2-hour window to the store to help them for their labor scheduling and planning purposes. Here in Atlanta, we're not meeting that goal. I keep telling the guys in Cincinnati, have you driven around Atlanta lately? It's kind of hard to get anywhere 75% of the time, let alone a 2-hour window. But that's where we are. So reduction of store claims. We want to have year-over-year improvement on our overshorts and damage that the stores are claiming for our quality. So that's our quality measure. And then also in sanitation, we have yearly audits from our corporate auditors and grade us on our sanitation, and we want to have a superior rating on that. And our bonuses depend on it, so we make sure we do that. And last but not least, to stay on budget. In logistics, it's a challenge. We have all the weather events and everything that comes at us, but we really want to do our best to stay on budget to provide the company a solid foundation as we go throughout the year for earnings. Some of our challenges, like Ken said, Paige said, talk about things that keep you awake at night. Really jealous of Mike and his brand-new facility. Our facilities, Mike was telling me he used to work for Kroger back in 1985, and we're still in the same facilities that Mike was in 1985. We have the distinction of having the oldest, one of the oldest Kroger distribution center in the network. It was built in 1948 over in East Point. And so when you have facilities that are older and space constrained, we have to get creative solutions. So we do a lot of things, excuse me, in our operation to keep the costs low and service the stores and service the customers the best way we know how. And we do that through a lot of partners, outside storage facilities, off-site of salvage activities, and multiple transportation providers. And there's a lot of things we have to do differently than maybe Mike has to do in his new state-of-the-art facility. So along those same lines, Kroger, our logistics capital has been reduced year over year recently. So we're prolonging the use of all of our tractors, trailers, and MHE equipment, which also can be a challenge, and just puts more emphasis on preventative maintenance, keeping our PMs up to date, and making sure that all the equipment's properly maintained and handled effectively by the operations of staff. Another challenge is just the culture. We talked about a lot of the training that we want to do and getting associates engaged, and with warehouse folks and drivers, getting them to really go on this journey with us and change the culture that may have been in place for years in the past is a real challenge. And then obviously rising in healthcare and pension costs for most everyone, I believe, this day and age. So keeping us more productive. How do we overcome some of these things that I've talked about? Not anything earth-shattering here. I would say revolutionary, but back to the basics of achieving the results through people. At our operation here in Atlanta, we have an order selector, Johnny, and Johnny runs 120% above the labor standard and gets mad if he's at 115%, and then he calls out fellow employees that they're not doing what they need to do. So, getting all the people engaged as well as Johnny is, and taking a stake in ownership and improving the processes and making everyone efficient, that's really what it comes down to. And through that is continuous improvement. That's one of our core values at Kroger, is continuous improvement, and we're looking to do that. We must improve on all facets year over year to make sure we are sustainable in a tough economic environment and a tough competitive environment. Today, there's lots of formidable competitors: Whole Foods, Publix, Walmart, the CVS, the dollar stores are they all sell food now, so it becomes a very competitive environment, and we must continuously work on improving ourselves. Communication among Kroger's a really big company and really big in logistics, and we have some silos that centers of excellence and silos that we've created with a centralized routing center and some things of that nature, but it also makes communication a challenge. So making sure that we're constantly communicating, not just with the logistics, but then also collaboration, which is in departments and in my within other departments. And in my intro, Ray mentioned, part of my role is communicating with merchandising, procurement, who can be our best friends or our worst enemies when they're preparing for Christmas and they give us all those turkeys that we have to ship out over a very short period of time. But, the collaboration is really key for our business with, like I mentioned, what's the sales plan going to be? What procurement make sure they buy it, and we make sure we're ready to ship it to the stores and get it out to the customers. So collaboration is a real key for us in our business. And that's all I have.
At this time, I would like to introduce Lee Bonecutter. He is with FPL Food, Vice President. He joined them in 2007 and is running one of their plants in Augusta, Georgia, and he now serves as the Vice President for the company.
Thank you, Ray.
Thank you.
FPL Food is a beef company. My last name is Bonecutter. All right? Let's get that out of the way right away. I want to elaborate on that a little bit. Every once in a while, I do a little search on Google just to see what Bonecutter shows up. Be cautious when you do meat terms. Make sure you have your family filter on. I've learned that there's adult entertainment folks with names like sirloin and tenderloin and chuck roast, and so I learned that the hard way, go a long way. Here's a couple of bone cutters right up here, believe it or not. That piece of equipment on your left is an old tool that's used called a bone cutter. They take chicken bones and grind them up to make bone meal out of. On the far right, something I just discovered, I don't even know what that thing cuts up, but they've acquired my name to call that piece of thing for cutting up plastic. On the bottom's a scary looking little tool there. It's called a bone cutter that they use in surgery. I don't know what they do with that. But there's actually an old trade called bone cutting. And on the top there, you can see an example of what they used to make. They used to make combs and spoons and various things like that out of it. So we don't know where the name came from, but I have a lot of fun with it. So who's FPL? We're a beef company. We have 5 facilities. We'll start with the one you see the star there. That's our main plant. That's where the cows walk in and they come out in boxes. It's as straightforward as I can be on that one. We harvest about, we use the term harvest now too. We don't say kill. It sounds nicer. So when I say harvest, you can go, harvesting a cow. Okay. Anyway, the main plant there, we bring in about 1,000 head a day. We also have another plant there in Augusta where we do a little further processing. We cut steaks, portion control for folks like Smoky Bones, or if anybody's familiar with Barbaritos in the Athens area, we make the meat that they use in their beef burritos and things like that. Over across the line in South Carolina, we have a ground beef facility. It's only fresh ground beef. We make a couple million pounds a week of ground beef, service folks like Kroger. And then down in Reedsville, we actually have a farm. I'll tell you a little bit more of that in a second, but it's part of our way of kind of controlling supply. And then we just acquired a facility down in Thomasville where we make frozen patties. We do that for retail farms, for food service. So we got sort of a fresh ground beef plant in South Carolina and a frozen ground beef plant down in Thomasville. So let's picture the farm back in December. As you can see, it'd be hard to have grass-fed cattle there. There's nothing for them to eat at certain times of the year. But let me explain a little bit about the beef industry you probably don't know. There's really 2 parts. There's what you traditionally think of as feedlots. When you go out to Texas and Kansas and places like that, you'll see thousands and thousands of cattle in big pens eating grain mixtures. That's the majority of what we do here in the U.S. But then there's also, you can call it maybe a byproduct industry, where we harvest older animals. In the north, we call it the cow industry. In the north, say in Wisconsin, there's dairy cattle that they get to a certain age and not produce enough milk. They send them in. In our part of the country, in the southeast, we have a lot of cow-calf operations. Their whole purpose in life for these cows is to pop out calves year after year. The southeast is a great place for calves to start. Matter of fact, Florida brags at certain times of year there's more head of cows in Florida than there is in Texas. in the winter months. The only thing is they're, only yay big. All these calves are then shipped out to the west, to the feedlots and places like that, and finished off and work their way back in the system. Well, we harvest the cows that, might have 4 or 5 calves, or they're not as, they worry about them getting too old. So we're that constant flow of cows that come through the picture. So that's good background for you to understand the rest of our company. We do have some brands. We're not very well known in the branded industry. We're just kind of getting going on that. Like anyone else, you're trying to add value in a competitive market. The Chattel Farms brand is the biggest item we had in that. We had a ready-made meatloaf this last year. It's raw. It's got the eggs in it. It's got the breadcrumbs in it. The consumer doesn't have to get her hands dirty anymore. It's actually in a metal tray. They don't have to read the directions. They can pop a QR code on the package and a little video comes up. Make it as simple as you can possibly make it. FPL beef, that's our standard box program you'll see. We also have started a local program, Southern River Farms. There aren't many feedlots here in the southeast right now. We're trying to grow that, develop that. That brand is currently in some selected white tablecloth restaurants in the Alabama area and in around South Carolina and Columbia area. So real early infancy on that, but we're excited about that program. Red Maple Farms, that's many is our frozen patty program. Many retailers such as Kroger, they have a private selection brand. This is for the folks that aren't big enough to have their own program, so we make things like that for them. Halal beef, does anybody know what halal beef is? If you halal is to the Muslim faith, as kosher is to the Jewish faith. So we have 3 of our plants that are actually halal certified. Export a lot under that program to places like Qatar and Dubai and Kuwait. And then we also have a new brand of product for more ethnic restaurants, very thinly sliced, like 1 millimeter, 2 millimeter sliced meat that goes for fajitas and Asian restaurant applications. So let's talk about the demand of the world as it is in beef. All right. One of the things that's I think everyone knows, in the next 20, 30 years, we're going to be going from 7 billion people to 9 billion people. What's interesting about that is the projections are that we're also going to grow 3 billion more people in the middle class. Middle class people around the world like to eat beef. The problem right now is even that middle class as it is, we're having the first time in the history of the world where greater than 50% of the population isn't getting enough food, isn't enough as what they want. So we in the U.S. are exporting more than we ever have on the beef side, $277 per head. We use that term per head a lot, so if I say that, it's not we're selling heads, we're just selling, this is how much meat per head. It's up 6% in dollars. That's about 4% increase in actual pounds shipped. And these next 2 statistics I think are pretty interesting. You look in the last 4 years, we can't get the data on beef alone, but beef, pork, and poultry alone, you think about 7 billion people in the world are eating 17 more pounds of beef, pork, and poultry from 2008 to 2012. That's a lot of billions, okay, when you think about that. Okay, conversely, let's talk about the U.S. I wish that was true. Well, real women eat beef, but we're not seeing that. They're actually projecting a decline in middle class in the U.S., especially as the baby boomers come out of that ranking and become in retirement. The last year, 2012 versus 2011, we actually saw a decrease in U.S. consumption of beef by 6.3%. It's a huge number. When interviewing consumers, according to an AMI, American Meat Industries survey just recently done, 31% of consumers said they're cutting back on meat spending. The number 1 item they're cutting back is steak. That's pretty painful for us in the beef business. What's also painful is retailers in the last year cut down their beef advertising. The amount of times you see a T-bone steak, a hamburger, whatever in their ad by 25% less than the year before. So we're seeing a tremendous, worldwide we're seeing this huge increase in demand. Domestically we're not. You can kind of guess where our focus is going. The other thing that's interesting, I don't know if you guys know what that little critter on the bottom is, that fish. That's a species of tilapia. over the last 5 years, on average, an average home, there's been one less meal per week or one less meal in those 2 weeks of beef. It's been replaced by that little critter. Tilapia has grown to an enormous amount of meal times for folks. So lots going on here domestically. Some of you may remember this ad, "Where's the Beef?" back in the 70s. I can tell by age who has and who's not in your head how old you are. There's some of you going, huh, what's that? But anyway, this was a Wendy's commercial back in the 70s that were complaining about the size of the hamburgers, and pretty recognizable for those of us that were around that time. But what I'm saying is we're the cows. Our herd in the U.S. right now is the lowest it's been since 1952. That's a huge, think about that, that's 60 years ago. And think about how many more people we're feeding in the U.S., how many more people we're feeding in the world, and we have that many less cows. What's really driving that kind of leads in the next point there is the feedlots, those things out in the Midwest and Texas and all that you see. They lost last year an average of $98 per head. For every animal went through, they lost $98. That's mostly driven by the price of corn, the feed cost. In my opinion, in industry opinion, we're making a huge mistake by putting corn into fuel. We're especially, even if the population was stable in the world, it'd be one thing, but thank you. That's nice to hear some support on that. It's going to have a detrimental effect, even away from the meat industry. The price of tortillas in Mexico has doubled. Folks that can't afford to eat, or even less afford to eat, that's part of the 50% that have. We used to export a lot of corn. We're not doing that. We're burning it up in our fuel tanks now. So anyway, I'll go off my high horse on that one. So talk about the beef in general. The U.S., we produce 14% of the world's beef supply, total. Within that, we produce 84% of the world's fed beef. All those feedlots you see out there, that's a kind of U.S. Canadian thing, that mainly. A few other countries, Japan, that like that kind of beef, but most of the rest of the world, they don't eat beef that's been fed on corn or finished in corn. So what we produce here from an export side out there isn't what the rest of the world wants as far as an export. So that's an interesting thing if we're going to try to supply the rest of the world. You may or may not know what a heifer is. Heifer is a female cow that never had a calf, young. So what's interesting is that the heifer kill is down. In other words, the feedlots out west, they're actually seeing more dominance of the steers, the neutered males, than the heifers. That's telling us that there's folks out there holding them back to have some more calves. So there's some optimism out there in the marketplace, we hope, to start building that herd up. In 1952, lowest point, where there's starting to be some folks seeing optimism ahead. Even with that loss in the feedlots of $98, there's some thoughts that, okay, this is a cyclical business, hopefully we've hit the basement. The other thing that really worries me in the supply chains, we've had droughts for the last 2 years. If we have another drought like we did the last 2 years, we could be detrimental for all the way into the bakery business, because all those fields, have to have things to grow in it, and more people are putting corn out there instead of wheat, oats, soybeans, and so, et cetera, et cetera. We're just diminishing that supply, and a drought will be very, very challenging. We hope and pray for rain this year. So, FPL, how's that affected me? All right, this is a pretty amazing chart in my opinion. 2003, I gathered my cows from the states you see highlighted in red. Some people, at that time, everybody's surprised that we were pulling cows from Texas. Believe it or not, because all the calf operations that go, the calves go from here, this part of the country out there, these trailers come back empty, so it's really easy to backhaul cattle from that part. It's not too often you can backhaul with a cattle truck. Matter of fact, somebody can figure that out. That would be a pretty good way to do it. So they're very specialized, very unique trailers, as you probably know. Well, I had to update this slide last week because we had gone from those states to where the last 5 months we've pulled cows from 26 states in order to keep supply coming in. And last week we actually had to bring a load in from Ontario. It's just amazing how far we're having to reach, and we're all of us packers are kind of fighting with each other, and you keep people out there buying at the auctions just to make sure they don't, pick you off, and we're just kind of all fighting amongst ourselves. It's a real challenging time. This isn't a plug for Kroger. It just happened to be a slide I had. So anyway, I just got permission to use it, by the way. So I was going to feverishly download something else here if I had to, but so I talked about the inbound side of things. Let's talk about the outbound side. This is an amazing statistic for me. When I first came on with FBL, less than 5% of our outbound product was backhauled or customer coordinated trucks. And 3 years later, it was about 15%. Now, we do very little as far as concern on the outbound. 85% of our product leaving us is controlled by folks like Kroger, Walmart, Tyson, Cisco, U.S. Food Service. They coordinate it, they organize it. Might be their own trucks or somebody else did. So those of you in that industry, hopefully you're spending some time in Austin, Texas, and in Cincinnati, Ohio, getting to know all the folks that do the logistics in those companies, because they've made a firm commitment to it. Kroger's one of the first ones from our perspective. That's why I threw your slide up there. But it surprises people sometimes. They'll see a Kroger trailer or two sitting in our yard, and that's because we're loaned up. So what's the future? I got to realize I'm gonna have more inbound freight cost. You saw the map. That's adding a cost to the business. Vertical integration, I mentioned briefly, we had a farm out there. It's not big. Last year we did about 8,000 head. We'll probably do about 12,000 head through there this year. We use that to kind of balance out when we can get them. There's 4 weeks a year I can't get cows from the auctions. Around 4th of July, everybody wants to, go do something else. And Christmas and New Year's, same thing. They want to enjoy time with their families. Nobody wants to bring cows in. But one of the things we've found with our customers, they want to be supplied 52 weeks a year. So we've used that as kind of a buffer zone to do that. But we've also, I mentioned that we were trying to get more into some fed cattle and to get that our locally grown program. We're using that as a pilot way of training other folks to get into the feedlot business here in the Southeast. We believe that something's going to happen in the economics. There's going to be some kind of feed that we can do to help with locally fed beef. We're watching the herd rebuild. It's encouraging to see the heifer kill down. I'm hoping that changes things around. And we're spending a lot of time on value-added activities. I talked to you about that meatloaf. It's amazing how many people love that. I mean, it's so simple. But with that, I've had a lot more increased activity in LTLs. Pretty much the beef business was straightforward, truckload. But now we got all these specialty things, my gosh, stuff that flies all over the country now on LTLs for us. We're working on an omega-3 beef program where there's the cattle actually fed high amounts of omega-3. The first retailer in the country that was interested, of course, is in Buffalo, New York. Then obviously, there's a lot of focus on the export. We're going to have to get way better at that. Very encouraged with what's going on in Savannah. That's our main port when we ship out of. We do a little bit out of New Orleans if it needs to go, Central America type of stuff.